Welcome to your storytelling. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to subscribe. I first noticed it one afternoon. They were laughing together in the kitchen, their voices a little too soft, their glances a little too long. At first, I shrugged it off as nothing, just my overactive imagination. But then, over the next few weeks, it happened again and again. There was something different about the way they interacted, a familiarity that wasn't there before. I tried to convince myself it was harmless, but deep down, something in me started to churn. I couldn't ignore the feeling, but I didn't want to confront it yet. What if I was wrong? It was subtle at first. She started visiting more frequently, almost as if it were planned. Every time she came over, my husband's mood seemed to brighten. They'd sit too close, their conversations lingering longer than usual. I tried to brush it off. Maybe I was being paranoid. But then, one evening, I caught them exchanging a look, something between familiarity and affection. My stomach sank. It wasn't just me imagining things anymore. I couldn't help but feel like an outsider in my own home, like something was quietly changing between them. One night, as I walked down the hallway, I overheard their conversation. My heart stopped. They didn't know I was standing there, hidden just around the corner. "You know we can't keep doing this," he whispered. My stomach twisted. "It's too risky," she replied, her voice soft but urgent. "We have to be careful." I couldn't breathe. Every word they spoke felt like a knife to my chest. My legs turned to jelly as I leaned against the wall, the weight of the revelation crashing over me. They were having an affair. My own husband and my sister. I tried to push it out of my mind. Surely, I was mistaken. But the little things kept piling up. He'd come home late, but his clothes were different, his scent faintly unfamiliar. My sister started acting strangely, avoiding my eyes, making excuses to leave early when she visited. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I started noticing all the signs I'd missed before. The way they'd exchange smiles when they thought I wasn't looking. The subtle touches, the inside jokes. It became undeniable. My own sister, my own flesh and blood, was part of this betrayal. My heart ached. The tension was unbearable. One afternoon, I caught her sitting on the porch, staring off into the distance. Her face was pale, like she knew the storm that was coming. "What's going on between you and him?" I asked, my voice trembling, but I couldn't hide the anger that laced my words. She didn't meet my gaze. She just sighed and said nothing. Her silence was enough. I knew. The way she avoided me, the way she couldn't look me in the eye, it confirmed everything. She didn't need to say it. I knew what she had done. That night, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from him. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean for you to find out this way." My heart stopped. I stared at the message, my hands trembling. What was he talking about? I opened the text and saw a photo of them together, laughing on a beach, her arm draped around his waist. It was like a punch to the gut. I could feel my world crumbling around me. How long had they been lying? I scrolled through more messages, more photos. The affair had been going on for months. I had been living a lie. The next few days were a blur of confusion and dread. I started to notice everything. The way they acted around each other, the way he always looked at her, the way she laughed too loud at his jokes. Every touch, every glance felt like a slap in the face. It was no longer subtle. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't crazy. They were hiding something, and I could feel it in my bones. I tried to keep my composure, but my heart was breaking with every passing day. They were too close, too comfortable. It was as if they'd forgotten I existed. I tried to confront him, but he shut down. The man who used to talk to me about everything was now silent, distant. He would come home late, barely acknowledging me, and fall asleep quickly, as if nothing had happened. I lay next to him, feeling the emptiness between us. I tried to talk, but he would just nod, his responses curt. It was as if he had already checked out, already moved on. I could feel the distance growing, and it hurt more than I could put into words. How could he do this to me? How could he just pretend nothing was wrong? I couldn't do it anymore. I needed to know the truth. I waited until he was in the shower, then I searched through his things. I found his phone, his messages, the emails, everything. My heart raced as I scrolled through the conversations, each one worse than the last. There they were, plan after plan, meeting places, secret messages. And then, I found the photo, the one I had seen before, but this time, it wasn't just a simple picture. It was a reminder that everything I thought I knew was a lie. My husband and my sister had been having an affair. My world shattered. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I had to confront them. I waited for the perfect moment when we were all together, and finally, I demanded answers. "What's going on between you two?" I asked, my voice shaking with fury and pain. My sister looked away, unable to meet my gaze. He stood there, silent, guilt written all over his face. For a moment, no one spoke. The tension in the room was suffocating. Then, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry," he said, but his apology felt hollow, meaningless. My world was falling apart. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he said, but his words did nothing to ease the pain. My sister remained silent, unable to offer any explanation, any apology. The betrayal hit me like a ton of bricks. The man I loved, the sister I trusted, both of them had been lying to my face. I felt nauseous. How long had this been going on? How long had they been sneaking behind my back? I felt a cold wave of disgust wash over me as the reality of their betrayal sank in. My family, my life, everything I thought I knew, was gone in an instant. The days after the confrontation were agonizing. I couldn't escape the lies. Every time I looked at them, I saw the truth, the deceit they had so effortlessly woven. He tried to justify himself, but his excuses didn't make the hurt go away. My sister had no explanation, only a look of regret she couldn't voice. I started piecing together all the moments they'd shared behind my back. The little lies, the late nights, the hidden messages. The betrayal was far deeper than I had imagined. Everything I had trusted was now tainted, and I didn't know where to turn. The fallout was immediate. Friends who had been close to us started to pull away, unsure of where to stand. Family members whispered in the background. I felt the eyes on me, the judgment, the pity. It was suffocating. He begged me to forgive him, but I couldn't even look at him. My sister, on the other hand, stopped returning my calls. She couldn't face me. I was left alone, broken. The love I thought we had was nothing more than a mirage. My trust in people had been shattered, and I had no idea how to pick up the pieces. Some days, I was filled with a burning rage. How could they do this to me? How could they betray me so completely? Other days, I was numb. My mind raced with thoughts of all the years spent in this false sense of security. Was I just a fool? It was like being on an emotional roller coaster that I couldn't get off. I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or disappear into nothingness. The hurt was overwhelming. Each wave of emotion felt like it was going to drown me, but I had no choice but to ride through it. Everywhere I went, memories of them flooded my mind. The family dinners, the shared holidays, the intimate moments I had with both of them. It all replayed like a broken record. I couldn't escape it. How could I have missed the signs? How could I have been so blind to their affection for each other? It felt like every happy memory now carried a bitter sting. I replayed every word, every smile, every touch, and with each recollection, the truth hit harder. I had been living in a fantasy world. My whole life was a lie. I began to question myself. Was I to blame for this? Had I been too busy, too focused on my own life to notice? I felt guilt creeping into my heart. Maybe I didn't give him the attention he needed. Maybe I pushed her away without realizing it. But deep down, I knew the truth wasn't my fault. They had choices, they had control, and they chose to hurt me. Still, the guilt gnawed at me. Was I a bad wife? A bad sister? I couldn't stop the self-doubt from consuming me. The weight of it was unbearable. Even when I was surrounded by people, I felt alone. The emptiness inside me was deafening. I couldn't escape the isolation I felt in my own home. I'd pass by friends, and they'd give me sympathetic smiles, but I couldn't connect with them. No one knew the true depth of my pain. I wanted to scream, but I didn't know how to explain the turmoil that raged inside me. The loneliness was a constant companion, a shadow that followed me everywhere. It was like I had been abandoned by everyone who mattered. I knew I had to make a choice, stay or leave. Could I forgive them? Could I live with this betrayal and rebuild my life? The thought of staying felt like a prison sentence, but the thought of leaving was equally terrifying. I loved him, or at least I thought I did. And my sister. How could I ever face her again? But I knew I couldn't keep living in this toxic environment. I had to choose myself. I had to find a way to heal, even if it meant walking away from everything. It was the hardest decision I'd ever made, but I knew it was time. The anger I felt was consuming. Every time I saw him, every time I thought of her, rage boiled inside me. I wanted to lash out, to make them feel the hurt they had caused. I wanted them to know how much they'd broken me. The world didn't seem fair. They had stolen everything, my trust, my peace, my family. And yet, they walked away with nothing but guilt. I couldn't let it go. I had to make them understand, make them feel the weight of their actions. I had to make sure they knew that this would never be forgotten. I began to plan, not just for revenge, but for my own survival. I couldn't let them win. I couldn't let them continue to control my life. I started making changes, small steps toward healing. I disconnected from both of them, started distancing myself from their influence. I spent time with people who truly cared about me, who never judged me. I worked on rediscovering myself, reclaiming the parts of me that had been stolen. I couldn't undo what they had done, but I could control my own future. I wasn't going to be a victim. The moment I had been dreading arrived. Both of them came to me, hoping to make amends. They thought I was ready to forgive, ready to pick up where we left off. But I had other plans. I sat them both down, and with a calmness I didn't even know I had, I laid out everything I knew. Every text, every photo, every lie. I watched as their faces drained of color, the realization of their betrayal sinking in. They were caught. There was no denying it anymore. It wasn't just me who knew the truth. It was the world now. He begged for my forgiveness, his voice breaking with every word. But I couldn't bring myself to care. His apologies were empty, hollow. How could he think a simple sorry could erase the hurt he had caused? My sister, on the other hand, offered a few words, but they didn't seem sincere. I could see the guilt in her eyes, but it wasn't enough. She had betrayed me. They both had. The pain was too fresh, too raw for me to accept their apologies. They wanted me to move on, to forgive, but I wasn't ready to let them off the hook. Life after the confrontation was even more difficult. The silence between us was deafening. I couldn't escape the weight of their betrayal, and the hurt lingered like a ghost in the room. He stayed away more often, and when he did come home, it was as if nothing had changed. My sister avoided me completely. I was left alone with my thoughts, with the wreckage of my relationships. My world had turned upside down, and I didn't know how to put it back together. I was caught in a limbo, neither here nor there, just floating in the aftermath of their betrayal. I couldn't do it anymore. I asked him to leave. I couldn't stand the thought of him in the house anymore, living in the space where all our memories had been tainted. He left, but not without protest. He begged me to reconsider, to give him a chance to make things right. But I was done. I couldn't look at him without seeing the lies, the deceit, the betrayal. It was over. And though the pain of it all threatened to overwhelm me, I knew it was the right decision. I needed space. I needed to heal. And I couldn't do that with him here. I confronted my sister one last time. Why? I asked, my voice thick with emotion. How could you do this to me? She couldn't meet my eyes. She cried, but her tears meant nothing. She didn't deserve my forgiveness. The betrayal was too deep, and I didn't know if I could ever trust her again. She tried to explain, to justify her actions, but I couldn't hear it. It was too late. I couldn't unknow what I now knew. Our relationship was forever changed, and I wasn't sure it would ever recover. As the days passed, I realized that healing wasn't going to be an overnight process. The pain still lingered, haunting me in the quiet moments. I'd sit in the living room, the space once filled with laughter and love, now empty and cold. I began to rebuild my life piece by piece. I took long walks, spending time with myself, learning to be okay alone. I focused on rediscovering my passions, finding joy in things I had once forgotten. It wasn't easy. The memories kept resurfacing, but I was determined to move forward. I couldn't let them define me anymore. One day, I looked in the mirror and saw someone I hadn't recognized for a long time. Someone stronger, someone who had survived. I wasn't the broken woman they had left behind. I had learned to stand tall again. Slowly, I started to rebuild the connections with people who truly cared about me. I stopped seeking validation from the ones who betrayed me. I took control of my future. I focused on growth. The past would always be a part of me, but it didn't have to dictate my future. I was finally ready to write a new chapter. A few months after everything had settled, I ran into him by chance. He looked different, tired, regretful. His eyes were filled with guilt as he asked how I was doing. For a moment, I felt the familiar pull of old emotions: anger, sadness, a deep longing for what we once had. But I stood my ground. "I'm fine," I said, my voice steady. "Better than fine, actually." He nodded, accepting my words without protest. It was a small victory. He had no power over me anymore. I had moved on, and as I walked away, I felt lighter. I received a letter one day, a letter from my sister. I opened it hesitantly, not knowing what to expect. It was a heartfelt apology, one that tried to explain her actions. She confessed to feeling confused and lost, and how she regretted everything. She begged for forgiveness, for a chance to make things right. I read her words, but I felt nothing. There was no anger, no hate, just indifference. She had broken something that couldn't be repaired. I folded the letter, not with bitterness, but with a sense of finality. I had already let go. Years passed, and the scars of the past faded into the background of my life. I had rebuilt everything, stronger than before. I was no longer defined by their betrayal, by their lies. I had found peace in the chaos. I focused on my career, my health, and the relationships that truly mattered. I became someone who trusted again, but with caution. And in the stillness of the night, when I reflected on everything that had happened, I no longer felt anger or resentment. I had forgiven myself, and that was enough. I had learned the hardest lesson of all, to trust myself above all else.